everybody. Very warm welcome. It is spring is in the air. It's the Tuesday, the 19th of September. It's just gone 12 o'clock, and delighted to welcome everyone to the FSC's Connect series. This is the program that we've been running all the way through COVID and now post-COVID, which kind of connects us as a community on topics that matter, and sharing expertise and learning from around Aotearoa, and certainly from across the membership, and leaning into things that are of importance to our members, but also to our customers. It is Mental Health Awareness Week this week, and so today's conversation is particularly important as we unpack some of the work that's been done right across the sector, some of the insights from research we're going to have a discussion about, and it's obviously an opportunity for all of us online to feel free to contribute and to participate in the discussion. So if you want to join the discussion, we'd love to have your questions in the Q&A and in the chat button. The better connected we are, the more engagement we have, so much the better. So encourage you to do that. I just wanted to briefly also let you know that the session today is about kind of understanding what's going on in the marketplace and hearing from Hannah and Kerry. Hannah from ASB and Kerry from Southern Cross. I'll do a bit more formal intros in a moment, but to understand some of the initiatives that their organisations are doing in the context of workplaces. What this session's not about is particularly overly personal stuff, although we might head there. And certainly there's a range of resources and so on that we're going to be making available both through this webinar and after the webinar. So that's a little bit about today's discussion. We are recording today, so everything's in the public domain, and we will be making this available post the event as well and sharing it far and wide. But with that as a little bit of an introduction, really delighted to welcome Hannah McHugh and Kerry Boielle from Hannah from the community partnership role at ASB, and Kerry from Southern Cross, who is Chief Sales and Marketing Officer. And Hannah, if you wanted to hop, awesome. Wanted to do a very warm welcome. Folks, thank you for joining this discussion. Really important week for us and really important conversation. So thanks for joining. And I thought I might just toss the first question, Kerry, you just perhaps to introduce yourself a little bit more and your take on this topic and the importance of Mental Health Awareness Week.
Thanks, Richard. Kia ora koutou. Ko Kerry Boielle tōku ingoa. Ko taku mahi ki, ko te Chief Sales and Marketing Officer at Southern Cross. So I'm Kerry Boielle, I'm the Chief Sales and Marketing Officer at Southern Cross. Pleasure to be here with Hannah and Richard today just talking about mental health. My take on this, or why I sort of said, yeah, absolutely, I'm not a mental health expert, but I thoroughly believe in this conversation and why I wanted to be part of it. Probably three reasons from me. Firstly, Southern Cross at its heart is a health and wellbeing organisation. So it's in our blood. We talk about it all the time, and we care deeply about the health and wellbeing, not just the physical health, but also the mental health of our members and our people. So that's the first reason. The second one for me is, for many, many years now, I've run big teams of people. And if you want to get the most out of your people and be highly productive and have a lot of fun in all the hours you spend at work, then actually you better take care of their health and wellbeing too, so everybody's engaged and productive. And thirdly and finally, I guess I'm one of five, and all of us have merrily produced offspring, and I've got lots of nieces and nephews and cousins, and I think my mum's one of seven. So a really extended whānau, and at times, we've had wobbles in this space. And so the more we talk about it, the more we share, the more we're willing to support each other, the more likely you get help early. And it becomes less of a major than if you leave and try and cope on your own, and then it can get quite gnarly. So that's kind of why I'm sitting here chatting to everybody today. Hannah.
Kia ora koutou katoa. I'm Hannah McHugh. I'm the Community Partnerships Manager at ASB. I joke that I've got the coolest job in the bank, but I have the privilege of the relationship management with our national charity partners. So Hato Hone St. John, KidsCan, and most relevant to this conversation is Youthline. I've got an interesting background for someone working in a bank, but my background is healthcare and the not-for-profit sector. And I just really believe that with complex multifactorial issues such as mental health, we all have a role to play, whether that's as individuals, teams, organisations, and wider communities. Probably similar to Kerry, on a personal note, my family's suffered more than a wobble. We are one of the statistics that have been affected by youth suicide. And I just fiercely believe in the importance of removing the stigma around this conversation, normalising the conversation around struggles that people have. So I guess I'd also just love to thank everyone that's joined today, taken time out of their day to prioritise a conversation around mental health. Already that's a step towards making the right changes and making a difference. So thanks for joining.
Wow, two very powerful introductions. Thank you both. Hannah, why don't we just dive in to the best job in the world and the work that you do with the Youthline. Maybe just tell us a bit more about Youthline, how ASB is connected, and kind of what underlies the work that you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll talk. I wonder if it's worth maybe just painting a bit of a picture, probably of the state of youth mental health in general in Aotearoa, because that's really how this partnership began. And it sounds a bit maybe dramatic to call this a youth mental health crisis, but it is absolutely the picture that the stats paint around this. So I guess some of the research that Youthline has done in particular have shown that rangatahi consider mental health to be the number one issue facing their generation. So I think it's 82% of young people say that mental health is their biggest concern out of anything. The statistics around actually psychological distress, now we're looking at 1 in 4 young people in New Zealand suffering with high or very high psychological distress, which is terrifyingly like a rapid increase, because about a decade ago that was 1 in 20. So it is just a radical jump. I know Youthline, they have seen since the pandemic, in the last 3 years, they've seen a 65% increase in risk. So this is the people that actually contact their service involving intervention or talking around self-harm or suicidality. So, sometimes it's as much as 1 in 3 calls or contacts involve intervention, and that is wildly different from what it used to be.
Hannah, can I just to jump in there? Is this pandemic related? I mean, have the kids of New Zealand been disproportionately impacted through the pandemic at their age and stage of growth, their ability to cope? Is that why we've gone from 1 in 20 to 1 in 4?
Look, I mean, my opinion, I'm not the expert in this, and I imagine there's going to be tons of research. It's going to be the most fascinating area of the research that comes out from this period of time. I don't necessarily think that we know that they have been over-indexed in their effect of the pandemic, but we know that across the board, mental wellbeing has suffered in all ages. But I guess what we've heard is there's some really key formative stages that these young people are going through, and their isolation has played a big role. School's hard enough as it is. All of a sudden you're doing it from home. You've lost some rites of passages, or you're moving into university, but you don't even get to go to lectures. There's just a lot that people have missed out on in that stage. But I don't know, Kerry, you might have some thoughts on this as well.
Look, it's fascinating because a lot of the research we've done, we've just released actually our 6th workplace wellness study by Southern Cross and Business NZ. And because we've done it 6 years in a row, we've actually got some data that goes through pre-pandemic, pandemic, and now are we post? Can we say post? I guess we're kind of there. And we've definitely seen the mental health challenges that employers are seeing turning up in their workforce have gone up, and maybe starting to settle a little bit, but settling higher than pre-pandemic times. So I would say, like you, there'll be some really fascinating studies. We don't specifically dig into the age of employees, but we're looking at sizes of workplaces and incidents of challenges and what's driving the fundamental concerns of employees, what's work related and what's non-work related. So really interesting space.
Something that's also quite fascinating, I guess one of the reasons why ASB got involved in this space more is that we were doing a lot of consumer research with young people, and what came out really clear is sort of anecdotally, rangatahi was saying that financial well-being and mental well-being are very hard to separate, and that young people feel anxious about their money situation, both their current and future financial state. So we sort of knew like this topic was coming up, and if we wanted to support our customers, our young customers, that actually we had a role to play in supporting their mental well-being as well.
Yeah, and interesting just on that. Firstly, it's fantastic that the Financial Services Council and the banks, ASB in particular, are really leaning into this financial health aspect of mental wellbeing. One of the data points we have found is that from a non-work related stress driver, and I've got my stats here, in 2018, when we started doing this survey, 41% of employees were saying financial well-being, financial pressure and stress is a cause of mental health issues. And that now is sitting at 62%. So it's gone, that sort of pre-pandemic now through to where we are, from 41 to 62 are saying, and it's the number one biggest driver of outside of work pressure, mental health challenges, is that the health of my finances and financial stress.
It's pretty chilling stuff. I'll come back to some FSC research, which we're launching in a couple of weeks. But Kerry, like Southern Cross, we've tracked the financial resilience conversation since the start of the pandemic. And the numbers, the connectivity between well-being and kind of overall health and overall financial well-being is very connected. That showed up in money worries and how often people are worrying about money and how quickly they could access money in emergencies if they needed to. But can I just go back to you? There's obviously a lot of different kind of ages and stages. Youthline is defined by, are we talking teens or under teens or 20s?
Look, there's not a hard and fast, and their service does service a bit on either side, but officially 12 to 24 is what we're talking about when we're saying youth or rangatahi. And so that's their core service, but they do have a lot of people younger than 12 contacting Youthline. It's quite shocking. So there are a lot younger than that contact. But also Youthline, it's something people might not be aware of, is that if you are like a caregiver or a parent supporting a young person, that Youthline is also there for you to support you through supporting a young person. But ultimately 12 to 24, when I'm talking about youth or young people, that's what I'm referring to.
Yeah, because as you pointed out, and as Kerry pointed out, and certainly anyone with kids, and I've got I've got two gorgeous children, but a 15-year-old, who's kind of, grown through the pandemic, and in amongst her peer group, and kids in general, there's just kind of been this, you're not 6 degrees of separation. It's much closer to home than that. Can you maybe talk us through a little bit more in the work that you do, Hannah, how that kind of manifests, and what are some of the tools and opportunities for people listening to kind of reach out and to get information, so it does become, like you say, an open conversation?
Yeah, so I think probably just I'd add from a personal perspective, say if there are people on this call today who are parents or caregivers or care for a young person, that probably the key things here. I mean, I've facilitated a few Youthline events, so really I'm just stealing things that experts have said. I'm not claiming to be an expert, but what the Youthline always reiterates is just that parenting is hard. And it's especially hard when we're in an environment sort of where we're bombarded with conflicting advice. And what Youthline always reassures parents is that nobody has all of the answers. And that probably the number one thing to focus on is actually just around creating space for young people. And typically that's done with regular, boring day-to-day opportunities. So whether it's driving in the car, whether it's over a meal, it's just having open, safe space for that young person to connect with you if they wish. Yes, we also need to be mindful that sometimes young people don't want to talk to their parents, and that is the reality. So it's, giving those young people permission and letting them know the other people that they might be able to talk to, whether it's a trusted auntie or a teacher or a coach or a school counsellor. There are also so many other services. I think Youthline is a great example because they are so specifically all about youth. That is their focus and their specialty. But even within that, there are lots of different organisations such as Rainbow Youth or Inside Out for different issues that young people may be going through.
Yeah, because we've all gone through it, right? It's a super tough time of life to figure out who you are and what you're believing and who your friends and who aren't your friends and where do I fit in the world. Overlay that with kind of where we've come through over the last few years. I mean, your statistics are beyond alarming, but again, there's a full blown crisis taking place out there, isn't there?
Yeah, and probably something that we as in most of the adults on this call wouldn't have dealt with has been an adolescent with social media, and that it just has completely changed things. So, like Youthline's research shows that, again, social media is right up there with top issues, so sort of with mental health, social media. But the challenging part is that youth also say social media is the best way to reach me and for me to be able to reach out. So that, it's not something we can demonize, because it's also, an option for social connection and for reaching out for help. But it's a very tricky space to navigate around how do we support young people to do this safely. And maybe it's more screen time versus social media. But yeah, it's a really challenging area that we haven't faced as adults, and it's a game changer for those young ones going through that now.
Yeah. Let me, if I can shift the conversation, because it feels like with a 15-year-old daughter, all these issues are very present. But I won't go there just right now. Kerry, maybe we can head to you for a little deeper dive on kind of where you're at in terms of what the research has found out specifically in this current bit of research. And you've pointed to some thematics and differences over the last few years since 2018. But maybe you can just give us a bit of a highlights tour through the Southern Cross Business New Zealand research.
Yeah, for sure, and save you from talking about your 15-year-old daughter, because this is being recorded and you may never get forgiven.
Oh, my God.
Nice save. Yeah, sure. Look, as I said earlier, this is our 6th workplace wellness study report that we've produced, and we're happy to provide it to FSC as one of those materials. As I know, Hannah's going to provide you with a whole bunch of beautiful materials as well for support afterwards. And some of the themes that we've seen coming through is just the shift over time. The report is not just around mental health, it's around workplace wellness more holistically, and so there are different sections of it. And some of the top line things that for me have been really interesting in running businesses is the impact on businesses of absence and the trends and how we're managing that over time. So I'll give you an example. In the survey, I think we've got about 137 businesses that have responded this time, 136,000 employees represented. So a really good range through there. The reality, I guess, is that New Zealand organisations are more and more focused on wellbeing over time. So we've certainly seen the focus shift. The annual cost of absence has gone up over time. That's now standing at around about an average of $1,235 per employee per year. And across the country, that then equates to $2.86 billion of sick leave basically being paid for. So it is a big cost to the economy and to businesses genuinely. When you add in the increased incidence of businesses trying to support the health and well-being of their employees, so they're funding health insurance for their employees, they're paying for EAP and counselling services, they're providing more sick leave, or as Southern Cross does specifically, well-being leave. And all of those things come at a cost, and they're part of what's driven that price up so much over the last few years. From a mental health, from a sort of a stress perspective, there's some interesting stuff, and so I'll focus more on that, albeit know that there's lots of other rich material in that report. We've seen around about 49.7% of businesses have reported an increase in the amount of employee stress that they're identifying and having to deal with. And financial stress is really one of the ones at the core of that. There's a new trend coming through which hasn't shown up in the past, and that's what we call quiet quitting. And so 22%, 1 in 5-ish, are hearing or seeing signs of sort of quiet quitting in their workforces. And I guess the bit that for me was interesting is, every individual you bring your home life to work, and you take your work life home. It is quite hard to understand responsible for creating, and I need to have the responsibility for addressing, or is this outside of work created stress and pressure and therefore not my responsibility? And actually the answer is it's yes, all of the above, because actually you can't separate. And so the biggest drivers of work-related stress are things like workload, relationships at work. So there's a good breakdown in there. And the biggest non-work related ones are the ones that Hannah was talking about earlier in youth, and it's playing out across all ages, is the financial concerns, and that's really stepped up significantly. And I think one of the other trends coming through is how businesses are dealing with those, what they're doing about them, how they're uncovering them, and how they're supporting their employees across that kind of holistic breadth. So there's lots of rich material in there, which, and as I said, we're happy to share the full report with FSC members.
Kerry, can we just unpack some of those themes? Quiet quitting. I mean, we kind of read through the pandemic, and the reason why the government turned on the tap to support with their wage subsidy program was there was huge fear, of course, that, businesses would have to lay off staff because their businesses effectively stopped and so on. And, in our financial resilience index, the job market was one of the strongest underpins that underpinned all well-being. So people had jobs. Actually, there were more jobs than you could poke a stick at because you couldn't bring people into the country. And so we've all been in holiday places where, you can't get a coffee or you can't get served, or the queues blew out, or like whatever. And that obviously still persists today. But we've now kind of come out of the pandemic piece. Just, can you unpack the quiet quitting? What is it? What does it look like? How do we know? Those kind of things.
I think once upon a time we might have called this work to rule in days gone by. So I don't think it's a completely new phenomenon. It's probably nuanced a little bit in today's work environment. And really what it is employees who are saying, actually, I'm not really engaged with this. I'm just doing the basics just to get my pay. Don't look to me for more. Don't look for me to be highly engaged. Don't look to me to do anything more than I'm required to do. And that's it. And so that's one element of it. Another element that's been coming through is people looking at their sick leave less as a there to support me if something goes wrong, and a component of, actually, that's leave I'm entitled to and I'll just take it. And so there's some of those themes, but they've existed over the years, But what we have seen is more businesses are talking about it and worried about it and seeing signs of it in their workforce.
Yeah, and that's manifested because I think in your report, the average, the total number of sick days, I think you said 10 million odd. That's translated to what, about 5.5 on average
5.5 on average per employee per year. Yeah.
And that's obviously up since before the pandemic, isn't it?
Yeah. So all of those trends, it obviously was even higher during the pandemic time when there was so much COVID around. But one thing I think that has trended through is actually employers understand. We've all learned the value of actually just not coming to work if you're full of bugs and you're unwell, not only to not share them and impact other people unnecessarily, but also actually just take some time off and recover and get well. Take the time that you need. And so that, we're seeing more and more employers. I think 89% of employers are actively encouraging their people to take time off. And that's part of what will also be driving that uplift.
Yeah, Hannah, I'll go to you in a moment, but Kerry, just a second one on this, and this is something you alluded to, and we've all been talking about what does the future of work look like. So through the pandemic, pre the pandemic, it was a bit of a luxury to be able to work from home occasionally. There was a lot of stuff to unpack. There was a lot of obligations on businesses to have the right health and safety checks and so on. And then kind of almost overnight, from the first lockdown, it was like, we all had the business continuity issues to deal with, which is, oh my God, we're now sending our entire teams, entire businesses into their living rooms, lounge rooms, offices, or wherever they could be, and we pretty much operated like that. For most of 2020, for a fair bit of 21, and then we start to come back out of that. What did your research share in terms of that piece, particularly in terms of the fusing of work and home actually becomes one? And so the ability to separate work from home and obligations, particularly when you may have had kids or parents or people around that you had to support. I wonder if you could shine the light on any of that.
Yeah, sure. The top work-related concerns for employees, as I said, first one was workload. But actually, if you go workload, long hours, changes at work, relationships at work, so they're not massively shifted. But two new ones have emerged, and one of those is number 5 on the list, caring for children while working from home. That's really, really impacting people. And I think, I don't have the stats on it, but certainly from talking to our team here, it's not just caring for children and working from home, it's navigating the fact that school is constantly closing, opening, childcare closing, opening, and all of those challenges. And so trying to juggle the work environment, the home environment, and children changing what's going on in terms of their schooling. So that's certainly emerged, and that was just not a part of the equation earlier in terms of pressures on employees. And then actually, there was a group, we'd normally go top 5, but 5 and 6 were really close. And that was actually just the fear of getting sick, the fear of catching COVID, and the fear of this fear environment, I think, was catching. We spent all of our time talking about how many people were dying. And that's landed, and that's created in my view, my personal view, that's created a little bit of catastrophizing and a little bit of a negative load on people where you're constantly talk about who's sick and who's dying. It's tough to sustain day after day after day, month after month.
And of course, the other point around this discussion, and sorry, Hannah, I will definitely go to you after this. But the other point here is that because we moved from building businesses, building teams, building culture, which typically happened prior to the pandemic in person, because you're always together in person. There was lots of now remoting, so we had to continue and to maintain that. But in remote places, we had to recruit, hire, and so on through the pandemic. How did that manifest through any of the feedback that came through your research?
I think there was some, there's, again, because it's not a stat that we've tracked previously, it just wasn't a thing. Now it's becoming a phenomenon. There's some early benchmarking there, but we don't know what's shifted. There's a lot of anecdotal challenges that have come through in the verbatim that, make for some interesting reading. I think the most important thing and the most interesting stuff that's come out of the report is what businesses are doing about it. And so I'm keen to shift the conversation to that in a sec, but I will hand over, let you have a conversation with
awesome.
Hannah.
Let's come back to what are we going to do about it?
Those aspects, yeah.
Awesome. Hannah, over to you. I mean, what's your observations, particularly with the lens of the work that you're doing on what's come out of the Southern Cross report, but more broadly as well?
So probably I'm still a little bit triggered by the previous conversation. So I was one of those parents working from home with a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, and that stage I just can't even, it just takes me back to this place of going, how the heck? How do we do this? And why are they always sick? But no, I think probably what I can speak to is around what ASB has been doing with Youthline. Because I think in the mental wellbeing space, what we can see from the research is it's so multifactorial that, there are just so many areas that businesses can get involved in. And probably what we've really tried to do is do less but do it well, and really focus on areas that we believe we can have a real impact, a measurable impact on this. So when we came on board with Youthline, it was about 18 months ago, our aim was to accelerate their incredible work through their various services, and really just connect more young people with the free mental health support available. So, one of the first things that we did is we used our marketing expertise and scale to try to normalise that conversation around mental health and encourage young people in need to contact Youthline. And what I actually really think is powerful about, larger brands doing this is we want this conversation to be so normal. What's more normal than a really boring bank talking about this? If a bank can talk about it, anybody can talk about it. So that was sort of our first thing. It's let's just be unexpected. Let's boldly talk about something that's not talked about to try to make that more everyday. And then the other thing one of the other pieces that we've done is a Youthline it's Leadership Connect program within secondary schools. So what the research says about young people is that they typically turn to their peers for support. And so what we wanted to do was develop, resilient leaders who knew how to look after wellbeing and could be that sort of listening ear that then connect other young people with the support services available. And actually just last night, quite fortuitous, as we had the graduation for the first year of that pilot. And so, 81 student leaders, left with their pins on to then go into the next school year at their school as student leaders who, feel, I think the stats were 98% felt equipped to support their peers and connect them with the support services available. So, it's really around just trying to change and develop leaders that actually can have a flow-on effect for their school and also their wider community as well over time.
Amazing. Hey, and ultimately, how's the customer, as you say, if a boring old bank can talk about it, anyone can talk about it. What's been the response from amongst your customer base?
A really interesting question. The large majority, very positive, but there are also others, I'm sure anyone in the financial services would know, stick to your lane. Just focus on money, focus on banking. I guess social media often brings out the negative comments, and the ones that sort of just go, stick to your knitting. But I think if we all stuck to our knitting, we would definitely be missing the opportunities to make a real difference for society. So we'll deal with the negativity, and the large majority, though, very positive, and I guess thankful that we are standing up for something that New Zealanders also care about is coming through quite clearly.
Which is amazing, right? Because, that argument of, stick to your lane, do what you do, we all, whether it's Southern Cross or ASB or any of FSC's members or anyone as a participant, I mean, we're impacting customers all the time, interacting all the time, and we all have a kind of social license to operate, which is not just about, deliver the services. It's much bigger than that. And Kerry, you mentioned earlier, right, this whole well-being kind of preventative message has been, is at the core of what's the core of your missions, core of the FSC's missions, core of many businesses' missions. I mean, how does that manifest inside a place like Southern Cross in terms of kind of standing up for what's right and helping to lead and guide the discussion on things that matter?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, Hannah, you go, and then we'll go to Kerry.
No worries. So at ASB, probably it's around trying to measure that social impact. So supporting things where we feel like we can actually measure that. And probably in the past, I think we're evolving the way that we approach our partnerships, and that we've always had a long legacy of supporting community sponsorships, but ultimately that's what they were sponsorships versus partnerships, and trying to partner in such a collaborative way that is far greater than financial support towards something, but is really leveling up what an organisation can do. So that's very much how we've approached Youthline, is like, what is the most impactful areas we can work on, and how do we do that? And it's, as I say, beyond financial support. It's around skilled volunteering, mentoring, strategic impact, marketing expertise, media training, connecting them with advertisers, just anything that we can do to help accelerate the incredible work that they do. So looking at it far beyond a sponsorship, and it's very much a partnership and collaboration.
We'll come back to that because there's a bit of a call to action at the end of this for those who may be interested, and there's a couple of great questions that have come through. So folks, if you're online and you want to engage with some questions, please do. I'll go to those questions in a moment, but Kerry, just to you in response to that question.
Yep, apologies. My light's just gone out, so hopefully you can still see me. I'll stand up and wave my arms around the ear in a second.
We can see it. It's all good.
Excellent. For me, how this turns up at Southern Cross, as I said, we're a health and wellbeing organisation, so this kind of stuff is at our core. We have got, and something we're seeing in the Workplace Wellness Survey reporting coming through, is businesses having really great programs in place. So most businesses have access to some type of EAP support services. We use a company called Raise, and we do a lot of not just promoting of what's available, but actually we run a lot of seminars internally talking about, I don't know, women going through menopause, or young parents dealing with children and social media, and we bring experts in to have the conversation internally and support our people. Added on wellbeing days, we've done so that people take the time to go in. I can book a couple of hours leave if I'm in the contact centre, a wellbeing leave, to go and get my smear test done. The stuff that, just the personal admin stuff that underpins your health and wellbeing, and you often don't get to. We've made it a right and an expectation to use your wellbeing leave, and leaders have a conversation, go, well, why aren't you? Surely you must have stuff that you need to go and do. And so we really promote that kind of thing. And I think, and we're seeing more and more businesses do that now. One of the things that I think is most powerful that businesses can do, and we've led the way, we've got something we call Switch to Well, which is an internally run employee wellness program, basically, and it has a number of components to it. It's really holistic, and we create that. We test initiatives and support packages with our employees. We get them, we get the feedback, we understand what's working really well, and then we like to roll those out to the businesses across New Zealand that we work with that fund health insurance for their people as well. And so we really try and drive and support. One thing that's had a really, really big impact on our people here, and it's helped us, I think, weather the impact of the pandemic and the constant change and negativity that's been around all of the messaging, has been we've run programs with our people leaders, everyone, whether you're leading a small team or a big team, or whether you're frontline or whether you're back office. Just we've brought some partners in. What is mental health? What does good look like? What does flourishing look like? What does languishing look like? And what's your responsibility as a leader to understand what that looks like? To how do you have the conversation? If you have the conversation, what on earth are you expected to do? If somebody comes to you for help, what resources are available? Where do you point things through? Where, as a leader, does your responsibility stop and you hand off to the experts? So we've actually done a lot of work with our people that are leading teams to help them support through that. And for me personally, it was really coincidental. I'd just gone through a course, had a chance to ask lots of great questions and realise lots of things. And then in my personal life, something pretty significant blew up a couple of days later with a very close family member that I shared some responsibility for caring for, that I would not have known where to go or what to do or where to start. And I at least had some basics. I knew how to understand where we were and how quickly to escalate it. We did end up on a call in the middle of the night with the mental health support services, emergency services that hospitals provide. I didn't know that was there. I didn't know how to access it previously, and I did, and we were able to get the help that we needed. That as a part caregiver for this person, they would have come to me for help and they might not have got what they needed. And so, the thing that's made a huge difference is actually helping your leaders navigate. Where do they go for the information? What's their responsibility? So that for me was hugely beneficial.
Yeah, thanks, Kerry. That's fantastic to hear. Hannah, I'm going to go to you. There's a really, really interesting question here on the social media point that you raised. Question is, do you think there's a strong case for workplaces to deter social media, reducing social media in a way to boost mental health? And noting that this conversation is also live in schools, and some schools are in fact starting to mandate non-use of, digital devices. Yeah, I wonder whether you had a view on either of those two things.
It's such a tricky conundrum, and I think the conundrum is because if you want to connect with youth and be relevant for youth, you have to show up where youth are. That's where they are. And so, look, I think it's going to come down more to screen time and safe access. So it's around probably picking the right, how to manage when to use phones. So what you just said around schools, if there's a way to cut that down within school times, then fabulous. If there are ways where parents can, sounds a bit old school maybe, but even just turning off the home Wi-Fi at night, so that they could still use their phone, they could still contact the service like Youthline, but actually they're not going to be in their room being exposed to things that might not be restful. So look, I know Youthline, for them their focus has always been with youth for youth, and that means that they have to be so relevant. So and they certainly wouldn't be stepping away from having a strong presence on social media in a hurry. But there's definitely a big gap around how do we educate and support young people using social media in a more appropriate ways than probably what has happened.
Yeah, it does feel like it's crept up on us all, and we're now kind of reaping the good and the bad of that without kind of grabbing, guiding, directing, training, educating, and so on. Kerry, your take on that question?
On social media?
Social media at work. Good thing, bad thing.
Work. Oh my gosh, it's a double-edged sword. I completely agree with Hannah. It's a really hard one to navigate. It's a thing, right? So you can't just go, oh, it's bad and not look. It's there. Particularly our young people are communicating on it. I think the most important thing is to do what we're doing and have a conversation. Have a conversation in your workplace to make sure that it's used appropriately and well, and have a conversation with your rangatahi to make sure that they know how to navigate what's safe, what's not safe. But yeah, it's a tough one, but you can't pretend it's not there. And actually, it does do some great things. Through the pandemic, one of my team was so fed up of all the negativity, she created a Facebook page, she's going to kill me, called Our Happy Place, and she made a rule, only good news, joyful, nice stuff on there, and actually it was a source of delight all the way through the pandemic. It was really lovely to just have a constant stream of positivity, and that was only deliverable by by social media, and it's global. We've got members all over the world now posting positive stories on there, so
Awesome.
It can do good stuff too.
Yeah, exactly.
I think something as well is just like rural New Zealand, that for people in smaller towns or areas, it can be hard to find your people, or the people that might have a similar issue, or might be with your neurodiverse, or identify with the rainbow community. It's like actually social media allows people in those more isolated areas to find their people or their tribe or a safe place to have those conversations, where sometimes that just is not available in certain parts of New Zealand that are still small and remote, and those conversations could not be had.
Yeah.
There you go. Such nuance in these conversations. Kerry, I'm just going to go to you. There's a really nice question just off the back of the research. Does any of the research in the workplace indicate differently for men versus for women?
That is a good question, and actually I don't have anything on that, but I can find out, and whatever way you've got of responding to Q&A post the session, I would say we probably will have, because we certainly dig into size of business, industry. I'd be very surprised if we don't do the gender mix as well, including potentially rainbow identification as well. So I'll have a look and see and share what's in there.
That'd be awesome, folks. It's 12:48. Just a couple more questions for Kerry and for Hannah. And Kerry, you opened the door to this conversation, which is, so we're running businesses on this line. They could be big, they could be small. We've navigated, and probably still are, a very difficult period of time. There is a lot of enough doom and gloom around wherever you find your news, and some of the stats coming out of your research, and Hannah, out of your research, are obviously pretty confronting. So if you're sitting in this and you're going, well, so what can we do? What ought we do? What should we do? Where are the resources? What are some of the answers to that? Hannah, if I maybe start with you and then come to Kerry on that.
Yeah, a report, I think we might be able to pop it into the chat, but the University of Auckland have a really interesting report, an interactive tool around exploring the factors influencing youth mental health. Again, my area is more in the youth space, but it just shows how many different options there are in playing a role in turning this youth mental health crisis around. And I think that's a really interesting place to start, because as an organisation, you might have a look at that and go, actually, we've got a legacy in doing this, or we do this part really well. How do we build this out and take it further? And probably it's taking it further to the point where you actually can measure impact, because that's probably what we've been lacking in the past in this space, is actually like, what does make a difference, and how do we capture that that impact? And probably the other thing that I'd just say is vital in the youth space is just involving the voice of young people throughout the process. We can't come in as adults or experts and just think that we've got the solutions. Like, a lot of it needs to be, youth needs to be co-creating whatever programs come into place.
Awesome. Thanks, Hannah. Kerry?
I would just suggest the simple ways to make a difference are to understand what's going on in your business and with your people. It will be different, you know, if your industry faces specific challenges versus another industry, the size of your business. So what we've seen come through in the research is actually more and more businesses are doing surveys to understand what are the things that are driving. We've done that year on year for many years now, and as that shifts slightly, for example, during the pandemic, the young families struggling with kids at home, through the school holidays, we ran a school holiday program in-house. We partnered with, I think it was the YMCA, don't quote me, and they came in and we actually ran programs in the building. And so, you know, what's going on with your people and what is within your ability as a business to do to support. And as I made a plug for earlier, provide some, if you're a bigger business, provide some training for your people leaders so that they are best placed to help. Don't turn a blind eye because they're so anxious, they don't know how to help, so they won't ask the question and they won't have the conversation. Give them the support to do that. And finally, a shameless plug. If you are one of the sort of 3,000-ish businesses across New Zealand that provide Southern Cross for your employees, we've got employee wellness specialists in our business. Reach out to your account manager and they'll give you some guidance about what programs you can run and where you find all of this wonderful, rich material. Because as a business owner, you know, you've got a small percentage of your headspace available to work on these things, and we can help you, you know, solve those problems. If you're not, I know FSC are going to pull together some great resources as well to help you in that space.
Fantastic. Hey, last question. If we're sitting here in 2 or 3 years' time, how will we know that conversations like these, weeks like these, discussions that shift the dial, how will we know we're starting to make a difference? Hannah, maybe start with you on that one.
Well, my gut feeling is that I'll probably look at the very end of the worst case scenario, and it's probably around seeing some stats changed. I don't want New Zealand to have one of the worst youth suicide rates in the OECD. That would be showing that we're making a difference. But I also want to be a realist. Like the problems that we're seeing with, you know, youth mental health now, they have been developing over a long period of time, and realistically, prevention for youth mental health starts pretty much in the womb. It goes like that. That's how far back it goes. So realistically, it's a big preventative piece of work that needs to go on with our youngest tamariki, in the hope that we don't see these stats, you know, in another 10 years repeating themselves. So look, it's not going to be a fast fix, but yeah, I would say the stats and also preventative measures actually happening earlier.
Awesome, thank you, Kerry.
So well said, Hannah. For me, what success would look like would be more and more businesses having simple preventative supportful programs running in workplaces, and that becomes the norm, that people know that if they might not be able to find help in their personal realm, they might not know where to go, that actually it's just available at work, and it's expected that I will participate in and utilise. And so more and more and more of our businesses providing the right kinds of support, for me, would be a way that we could see a difference. And given we track through our surveys how many businesses are and aren't, we'll be able to see whether or not you know, that has shifted. And then hopefully, as Hannah said, if there's more preventative work going on, then over time we will see the worst of those stats come backwards. Sometimes terrible things happen, and you know, people get terrible illnesses and they lose people they love, and you know, you can't eliminate stresses and pressures. They will always be there, but if we can help people to manage through those better, then we'll make a difference.
And that's a pretty salutary way to end, and a pretty awesome way to end. So on behalf of all of us who are watching right now or watch later, a huge big thank you to Hannah and Kerry. If we could do a round of applause, we would do a virtual round of applause. Really important discussion, really important week, and I think so many gems have come out. Hannah, you're right, this is not a quick fix. This has taken a long time to get here. It's going to take us a long time to get out. But I think, Kerry, to your point, which is, acknowledge, be aware, have a game plan. Hannah, to your point, normalise the discussion, I think is right. And like I said earlier, we're all a person away from being knee deep in this conversation, whether it's a work colleague or whether it's a family member, whether it's people in our broader whānau or close. We've all got some stories to tell and some stories to share. And so thank you to Kerry and Hannah for sharing your stories with us today. Lots of information on the chat, lots of information to follow, access to resources, folks. Just a quick plug for the 28th of September, we're launching our next tranche of research, which, whilst it's not exactly on this topic, it certainly shines a light on the disproportionate impact that younger New Zealanders, not so much the Youthline end of younger New Zealanders, Hannah, but certainly the under 40s who, as a result of the pandemic, are showing up disproportionately in a lot of the stats that are difficult to face into. So we're going to shine a light on that on the 28th. Just look out for your FSC Connect info and you'll find out more. For now at 12:57, Kira, have an awesome afternoon. Enjoy the springtime. I think the vitamin D and being out in this beautiful country and great outdoors is very good for everybody's health and mental health. So I'm going to do that soon and I hope you do too. For now, bye for now. Cheers.
Happy day.
Kia ora.